There are people who are aggressive, but it's their flesh that's aggressive. So we do have to discern ourselves. We see Absalom being aggressive, and we see another brother of his becoming aggressive for the king, for the kingdom, and they're kissing hands, and they're being politically motivated. I think we have to discern ourselves and discern which part of us is being aggressive. As far as the kingdom, it's allowed. Our flesh, we're not allowed to be aggressive. And we have to know ourselves, know that that's pride. That's us putting ourselves forward. That's us wanting the higher seats at the banquet. You have to discern yourself. You have to figure yourself out. But there's times, Joshua and Caleb are prime examples of someone who said, give me that mountain. You know, I have this promise. I want my inheritance. We see David going down to the battle, and he wasn't listening to his brothers. And they were saying, you know, they're calling him arrogant. Sometimes, this sounds funny, but with David, the example, he went down, as brothers said, who'd you leave those few sheep with? And they said, we know your pride. And David's confidence in the king, invisible king, his confidence in God sounded like pride. He was putting himself forward. Who's this uncircumcised? Yes. You know, it sounded to his brothers, maybe to the proud, it sounds proud. I don't know. God heard it. He liked it. And he felt like he was being honored by David like nobody else. Nobody else was honoring God like David. And so somebody might consider you're putting yourself forward arrogance. You're going to have to sort that out in prayer. That's going to take some discerning ourselves. I'd like to talk about a couple things. In Daniel, the book of Daniel, Daniel decided, God didn't tell him to do this. He decided, chapter 12, that he would seek the Lord on behalf of the nation. He's just a young guy. He's not in leadership. He's not in position. But he has a heart for God, and he says, I'm going to seek the Lord and find out what the time frame is on God restoring Israel. Well, no one was doing that. People were just living in what would be Iraq today. They were just living there, and this young guy got stirred up, a teenager, maybe even at this early life, and he began to fast. That's aggression. So he begins to fast and pray and humble himself, and he misses meals, and nothing happens for weeks. It looks like he's not getting anywhere. Finally, an angel shows up in his prayer room, and the angel is Michael. He's one of the highest angels. He's an archangel. And he says, Daniel, you're beloved by God. He said, from the moment that you humbled yourself, from the moment you began to pray, from the moment you began to fast, God answered your prayer. And he said, I've been wrestling with, he was contending with a demon over that area. I don't know how much of that happens today because the Holy Spirit's inside of us. Jesus is inside of us. He can speak to us on the inside. I'm not sure that Old Testament principle still applies. The story is inspiring, because somebody was contending on behalf of the nation, on behalf of the people, for revelation. And God gave it to him. He said, now that I'm here, here's what's going to come. And he began to show him revelation. And Daniel had been reading the book of Jeremiah, and he figured out, 70 years. And that time was now coming to an end. And so he interceded on behalf of the nation for them to come into the will of God. It's profound. But what I'm struck by is the angel saying, the moment you set your face to seek God, the answer was on the way. It just didn't look like it to Daniel. And I think that's a lesson for us, just to keep going, believing that there's a breakthrough coming. Just stand, keep standing. Having done all, stands. Just stay with it. Keep believing. Powerful story. Paul, in Romans chapter 15, verses 30 and 32, he asked the Romans, he'd never met them. They'd never seen his face before. But he said, pray for me. He didn't just say pray for me. He said, strive together in prayer for me. That's wrestling language. Strive together in prayer. I want you to really go after this thing in prayer. Romans 15, 30 to 32. Strive together in prayer. It reminds me of Colossians chapter 4. Paul's in prison. Whether he's in the same cell or very close, he could hear a guy from Colossae named Epaphras. And Epaphras, most people think he was the guy who started the church at Colossae. Paul had never been there. He wrote to them, he says, you've never seen my face. He was based in Ephesus for over 3 years. And out of Ephesus, all those 7 churches of Asia, there's about 9 actually, they were all started by people hearing discipleship teaching and then going out and doing it. And Paul hadn't gone on that circuit. He stayed at that school of Tyrannus every day, speaking morning and night, every day, morning and night, with tears. And so the Colossians had never met Paul. Epaphras had, and he's in prison. I don't know if they're in the same room or close by where he could hear this young man praying for his church. And so Paul writes to the Colossians a letter, but he says, Epaphras, who's one of you, is here with me in prison. And he has a great zeal for you. I hear him wrestling in prayer for you. He's laboring earnestly, my Bible says. Wrestling, he's contending that you would come into all the will of God. You'd come into all that God has for you. And Epaphras believed, and Paul believed, that if someone didn't pray it, it wouldn't happen. That they wouldn't come into all God's purposes. See, every church has a purpose. Every church that God starts has a plan that he wrote before the worlds were, before anything was about that church. And this is what that church will do, and this is what they'll accomplish. This is who I'll send to have grace to help this church become what they should become. But I'll get the people praying, and somebody, probably the leadership, will have to really labor to believe that that will that's in heaven will actually happen. And so Epaphras had some kind of connection. He had an invested interest in seeing that church. I don't know very many people who pray for their church like that. They get sweaty, that really bellies down and goes after God and saying, my church must come into it's your purpose, your plan. It couldn't be your plan, God, for meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. There's no grace. It doesn't take grace to do that. What are we to do? Why do we exist? What are we for? What are we to accomplish together that we couldn't accomplish apart? Someone needs to pray that through. Epaphras believed that was his responsibility. He believed somehow it wouldn't happen unless he wrestled. Paul could hear him in the other room. Maybe he's groaning. Maybe he's saying, oh, Colossae. Oh, Colossae, you have much more of a, God has a plan for you. God has a purpose for you. You need to be mature, perfected. You need to come into more, you're not where you should be. Oh, Colossae. Whatever he was saying, maybe he's praying in tongues part of that time. Paul could hear him, so he said, this guy has a zeal for you. He loves you. He's wrestling in prayer for you. See, there are people who fight against the church, who wrestle with leadership to have their will done. They want their way. And some are very political. They spend a lot of energy. They wrestle, but they're not wrestling for the purpose of God. They're wrestling that their own will would be done in the church. Big difference. Again, it comes back to discerning ourselves to figure out why we do what we do. Which part of us is zealous? If your flesh is zealous, well, you'll fight. You'll contend. But if your spirit is zealous and you're kingdom-minded, you'll fight that your church comes into all the purpose of God. So let me leave you with this. Do you wrestle? Do you wrestle for your church? There's no distance in the spiritual realm between here and Buffalo, from here and Santiago, Conception. There's no distance. So you could pray here today, and God will answer it no different than if you were in Chile or somewhere else. You can pray for countries, you can pray for people. But if you don't pray, it's likely nothing will happen. John Wesley actually said that. It's a startling thing. He wrote, and he said, I believe, Wesley said, I believe God does nothing except an answer to prayer. We have this idea that God's so big that he just says, well, I want this, so I'll do this, I'll do that. No, in order to birth Jesus, he had Jesus prophesied into being 1,000 years before he came, because he wanted Jesus to come. But he says it has to come through people. I think part of the reason why it has to come through people is because of the accuser of the brethren, who could say, well, who could stop you? You're so big, you're so mighty, you could just do whatever you want. If you want people, you can steal them. These people were mine, and you stole them from me. Your big hand just reached in and just took them. And God can say, no. I only took those who asked. Or other people were interceding for them, and they were asking on their behalf because they didn't know how to ask. And I only worked where I was invited. And so aggression and prayer, Jesus said, ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be open. Knocking is kind of a testing, because we don't always know what the will of God is. And so I'll knock and I'll try something a little bit with humility to find out if that's the Lord or not. I think that's allowed. But asking, seeking, knocking, that's on us. That's not, and does he want to give? Yes. Does he want to be found? Yes. Does he want to open the door? Yes. But he wants us to be part of the process. So Jesus himself wrote this to a church, one of the 7 churches. He said, I stand at the door and I knock. And if any man will open, that's human involvement, that's human participation, I will come in and sup with him and he with me. In other words, you have something to bring to the table. You have something that will feed Jesus. And he loves that exchange, but he's got food for us. He said, I knock. See, he's mighty. He's a mighty king, but he's very meek. So he knocks if we open the door. I remember one time I said, Lord, I don't think I know what your knock feels like. I don't know if you've ever knocked at my door. We take that verse out of context and teach it as a salvation message. If someone will receive Jesus, he'll come in. He's writing to church. He's writing to Christians. He's talking about koinonia, fellowship. If anyone hear my knock and hear my voice and open the door, and I said, Lord, I don't think I know. What's your knock feel like? Well, the next morning, I woke up and I felt his knocking. And I said, oh, I felt that before. I know what that is. I didn't know that was you. I thought that was me. I didn't know that was your knocking. Oh, now when I feel that, I'll open for you to come in. Now, my knocking, I could tell you what that was like. But it may not be the exact same knock that you have. I don't know. You have to figure that out for yourself. But he says, I knock. So he takes the initiative, but if there isn't a human participation, human involvement, it won't happen. Your want to has to be engaged. So Paul wrote to the Corinthians, he said, desire spiritual gifts, be zealous for spiritual gifts, seek to excel for the spiritual gifts that will benefit the whole church. That's all on us. Covet earnestly the best gifts. Covet is hot. Earnestly is the word hot. Hot. Be hot for the best gifts. I don't know. Did you write down what you're hot for? Could you come up with 3 things? I bet you can't come up with 3 things that you're hot for.
Like passionate about?
Hot. Aggressive. Hot. I bet you can't write down 3 things. I mean, I'll talk to young people in Chile and I'll say, you're crazy. You're local about football. You're hot about football. Maybe you're hot about some girl, some guy. But spiritually speaking, what are you hot for? I bet you're not. Which explains, people often ask, how come we're not seeing the gifts of the Spirit today? Well, very few people are hot for the gifts of the Spirit. But I asked my pastors for a key to the church so I could go in there and pray. And I almost wore out the carpet, it seemed like me. I just prayed, God, I know you're going to make me rich. Make me rich in grace. I want to be rich in the gifts. I want healing. I want this. And I just went after it. And he never said no. That was the most amazing thing. He never said, you're too greedy. You're too aggressive. He never said, enough's enough. I've given you a little bit, and that's going to be enough. He never said that. I don't think we can really find out how far we can go until we start trying. Somebody's going to have to say, well, no one's being healed in my church, so I'm going to press him for the gift of healing. Somebody has to. Amen?